some of the media coverage of the conflict in Ukraine has been kind of off. We have reporters and pundits making some rather awful remarks about the nature of this conflict and these refugees versus, say, conflicts and refugees in the Middle East. Have a listen.
But this isn't a place, with all due respect, like Iraq or Afghanistan, that has seen conflict raging for decades. This is a relatively civilized, relatively European, I have to choose those words carefully too.
I'm sorry, it's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed, children being killed every day with Putin's missiles and his helicopters and his rockets.
Now the unthinkable has happened to them. And this is not a developing third world nation. This is Europe.
In another clip, well-dressed people, and this is not the third world. They really mean white people, don't they? The reason they seem to want us to care more about Ukraine, and we should care about Ukraine, but not because they're white Europeans. That shouldn't be the reason we care about Ukraine.
That was Mehdi Hassan pointing out the hypocrisy and racism in the way that the media is currently covering the Ukraine crisis. Now, before we get started, I want to be very clear about something. Putin invading Ukraine is 100% unjustifiable, and it is subjecting the people of Ukraine to the horror of war, which is something that nobody should ever be subjected to. But as somebody that was in the military for 8 years, and especially somebody that worked with drones and saw firsthand some of the serious impact that war has on people, I have some serious concerns about the way that this is being covered. And I have some serious concerns about the international norms that are being rapidly shifted and erased by what is going on in Ukraine. First and foremost, this shameless racism is absolutely unbelievable. Because right now what is happening is there is more than just one war going on. Putin is invading Russia, and that is terrible. But also Israel is occupying Palestine, and Saudi Arabia is bombing Yemen, and the United States is bombing Somalia. We should care equally about the suffering of all of these people. We should care about the loss and tragedy that they're having to endure every single day. And these people in the media are revealing themselves to truly only care about white folks, to only care about European folks, the people that they think are privileged and rich enough to justify our empathy. And it speaks to the shameless nature of the United States and its foreign policy, completely disregarding the lives of anybody living in the global south. And you can see that especially in the way that people talk about taking in refugees. I remember just a few weeks ago, right-wingers screaming about refugees coming to the United States. But now all of a sudden, since they're refugees that are white, they're open arms. And that open arms policy should be for everyone. If there is any refugee anywhere in the world, they should have an open door policy to the United States of America and to any other country. But we don't, because racism still is very much the official policy of the United States of America. There's also a major problem with the way people are normalizing some very problematic things that are happening, and we really need to understand this. And so I want to be clear. We need to understand the difference between critical support and uncritical support. And I am suggesting that we take a critical support stance when it comes to the civilians in Ukraine. And here is why. Just last week, the Ukraine National Guard official Twitter account put out a tweet referring to Muslims as orcs. That is unbelievably racist. And in the middle of a conflict like this, especially since it was highlighting the Azov battalion, which is a Nazi battalion within the Ukrainian military, we should be willing to criticize that. We should not be willing to overlook the reality that there are Nazis present in this conflict. And even while we support Ukraine in their defense against invasion, we also need to make sure that we are not going out of our way to glorify Nazis or to give a pass to their rhetoric. Because if that becomes normalized in the international stage, then it too will become normalized here within the United States of America. The more willing people are to give a pass to Nazis abroad, the more willing they will be to ignore Nazis here at home. This isn't to say that the entire Ukrainian government or military is a Nazi government, but it is to say that we need to understand that no war is a war between saints and sinners. There is always going to be problems on both sides. It is true that the Ukrainian military has killed thousands of people in Donetsk and Luhansk over the past decade. It is true that there is a Nazi battalion. This doesn't mean that President Zelensky is a Nazi or anything like that. President Zelensky literally came into office as a sort of moderating force to try and bring Ukraine away from some of the extreme right. And to a certain degree, he has done that. But on another level, what this article says right here...
See, this was an op-ed in which the writer, Daniel Hannon, said that these people, the Ukrainians, they're like us. They watch Netflix. They have Instagram accounts. They read uncensored newspaper, and then goes on to say that war is no longer something visited upon impoverished and remote population. Oh no, it's happening to us here in Europe.
About uncensored newspapers? That's actually not true. President Zelensky did actually ban a certain chunk of opposition media within Ukraine. And that's an issue. And I think the biggest issue, the biggest violation of norms that's happening right here that we really need to emphasize is the trotting around of prisoners of war. When you see these photos and videos of captured Russian soldiers on social media, you need to understand something very important, that is a war crime. Prisoners of war are supposed to be guaranteed certain rights. One of those rights being a right to not be used as political propaganda. Specifically, according to Human Rights Watch, and I quote, "Prisoners of war must be protected in their honor. In particular, they must not be subject to insults, violence, and public curiosity, whether from enemy forces or civilians. They must not be paraded or interrogated in front of the media, and their images should not be used for political purposes." So when Ukrainian forces trot around these images on social media of prisoners of war, they are violating international norms in a way that has the potential to damage the entire system of international governments of warfare that we have. There are rules that are set in place for a reason, to minimize civilian casualties, to minimize the suffering that exists under war. And Ukraine is violating those norms. There's also another issue when it comes to Ukraine deputizing basically every person in Ukraine and just giving random people weapons. There's a reason why most countries don't do that even while they're being invaded. The reason they don't do that is because when you do that, you take civilians who are an unlawful target and you turn them into lawful targets, according to the international laws of war. That is an extreme violation of norm. It is also very concerning because we need to understand that there is a far right that exists inside of Ukraine. And think about it for 1 second. Do you think that they are all going to act out of good faith? I mean, think about it for a second if it happened in the United States of America. If the United States was being invaded and they just started giving everybody guns, do you really think people like the Proud Boys would be good faith defenders of the United States? Or do you think they would use the war and chaos as an opportunity to commit violence against their neighbors? That is another concern that needs to be addressed. And that is once again one of those reasons why these international norms exist. What we need in this situation right now is de-escalation. And political leaders in the United States, as an uninvolved party, the United States is not being invaded right now. The political leaders in the United States need to prevent themselves from being consumed by the fever of war. Because if they do, then it will lead to only more escalation in this. The people of Ukraine are the people that are defending themselves from invasion, and we should lend them critical support. That is support, but with understandings that it is responsible and correct to criticize the violations of international norms and international laws that they are currently doing, while still respecting their right to defend themselves against the Russian military. But what American politicians should be doing in this situation is doing whatever they can to keep a cool head and negotiating with Putin and other international leaders to do whatever is necessary to make sure that Russian forces withdraw as soon as possible. I also think that political leaders in the United States of America have a responsibility to hold Ukraine accountable to make sure that they are not violating international law and not violating international norms. Because think about this for a second. Think about all of the American troops that are out in the world. If they got captured, would you want them to be trotted out in the same way that these Russian soldiers are being trotted out? Is that what you want? Recognize that the United States have a long history of being the evil invaders, and recognize that all of the actions that the world is taking against Russia right now could easily be turned against the United States. There's a reason why there are international laws regarding how we are supposed to go about warfare. And I know that most people don't understand what those laws are because you all weren't in the military. But a lot of these political leaders do understand, and they know better than to celebrate some of these tactics that are being used.
This is Ben Carollo with Rebel Headquarters. You can catch my show Galaxy Brain on the Young Turks Twitch channel every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to stay up to date with my content, you can follow me at Benjamin Carollo on Twitter. And lastly, to those of you who might be wondering or have noticed, my pronouns are in fact she, her.